Alright, so 2.5 is the last two elasticities. We talked about cross-price elasticity and income elasticity, determining whether two goods are complements or substitutes, and then whether a good is an inferior good or a negative good. Inferior good or normal good. So you can see the 4 there. We've done 1 and 2. Now we're going to do 3 and 4. That's just telling you what they are, that they're the same. Like I said, for all 4 of the elasticities, you always put the change in quantity on top of your equation. And so that's the easy way to remember how to set it up. It's the quantity change is always going to go on top. So cross price determines whether two goods are complementary goods, which are bought and used together, peanut butter and jelly, or substitute goods, Coke and Pepsi, that can take the place of each other. So we've got hot dogs, we've got hamburgers, we've got hot dog buns. And so what we're looking at is that when there is a change in the price of product A, in this case hot dogs is product A, how does it affect consumers' purchasing and demand for product B? So when the price of hot dogs goes up, how does it affect the amount of hamburgers that consumers want? And then when the price of hot dogs goes up, how does it affect the amount of hot dog buns that consumers want? So for cross price and income, you have to pay attention to positives and negatives as well. Whereas in the two price elasticities of supply and demand, you didn't. They were absolute values. We just cared about the amount of change, not whether it is positive or negative. Here, you have to pay attention to whether things increase or decrease, and then whether your coefficient comes out positive or negative is how you make the determination. So, if we were to plug this in, percent change of quantity B. Well, if we're just plugging that straight in, this is product B, says the quantity increased 40%, so that would be a positive 40. The percent change in price of product A. Well, product A's price increased. So, you have positive 40 over positive 20. When you simplify, what is that?
2.
You get 2, which is positive. Comes up positive. These two goods are substitutes. So, in practicality, the way this works. So the price of hot dogs goes up. People are going to buy less hot dogs because now they're more expensive. Hamburgers are now the cheaper alternative. So they're going to buy less hot dogs because they're more expensive. They're going to buy more hamburgers because they are the cheaper good. We plug it back in. Price increases 20% for product A. That stays right here. But now we plug in negative 40 into our percent change of quantity B. So now we have negative 40 over positive 20. What's our coefficient? Negative 2. And so now we see it's a negative coefficient. These two goods are complements. So when hot dogs get more expensive, people are also going to buy less hot dog buns. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can say, don't overthink it. It's pretty common sense stuff. You're just plugging those numbers in. But you've got to pay attention to whether things increase or decrease to get the correct coefficient. This would be examples that they could give you for multiple choice questions. But once again, you set it up in that formula, simplify, and then whether it's positive or negative, you make that determination. Now, the greater the number is, the more they are substitutes or complements. So like 2 would be a greater number than 0.25, and so these are definitely complementary goods. Here, yeah, they may or may not be substitutes. I mean, that's pretty close to 0, but the greater that number is actually tells you how much or by what degree they are complements and substitutes. That doesn't really get built in, but it is something they kind of want you to inherently know, that that bigger number means, hey, that's a greater degree of either complements or substitutes. I had something else, I forgot it. I'll think of it. The last one. Oh, I know what I was going to say. They do not give you these formulas on the test, the way you set it up. So when you have to, if you're trying to calculate the cross-price elasticity of demand, you have to know this and how to set that up. They don't give you these formulas. And there's a whole bunch of formulas we're going to get to throughout this class. And so you're going to have to know those because there's not like a formula sheet they give you for the exam. So just kind of as we get into this, make sure that you're paying attention or highlighting or whatever when we get to these formulas or equations to calculate these. Income elasticity. This is the last one we'll do. And this determines whether a good is a normal good or inferior good. So as always, you've got the percent change in quantity. That's the nice thing about these, because that's your way of remembering, hey, I know percent change in quantity is always going to go on top. And then just whatever the other measure is you're trying to figure out, it goes on bottom. So, it says income increases 20%. Well, that would be positive 20 because your income has gone up. And it says the quantity decreases 15% for good A. So you would have negative 15 over positive 20. And so we know that's going to be whatever the math comes out, it's going to be negative. And so if it's negative, these are inferior goods. But as their income went up, they bought less of that good. Ramen noodles. If you get a raise or you get a good job out of college, you're probably going to buy something other than the cheapest food item that you can find. And so this would be a negative or inferior good. If it's positive and positive, then it comes out to be a normal good. That as your income went up, you bought more of it. If it's negative and negative, then it's also a normal good because your income went down, you bought less of it. If it's the opposite, then it comes out to be an inferior good. Once again, just an example of the way it's presented on tests. It says if income elasticity of demand for good X is negative and the cross price elasticity of demand between good X and good Y is negative, which of the following must be true? And so this is where you need to know those relationships as well. But it says X is an inferior good and X is a complement to Y based on those positive and negative associations. Because sometimes they'll give you this in FRQ. Sometimes they've wanted you to calculate it out before. That has come up, is actually knowing that formula. But sometimes it's just as simple as knowing, hey, I know positive means it's going to be a normal good, negative means it's going to be inferior. And just knowing those relationships. So, once again, more example. Well, we can go through these. So, a decrease in the supply of oranges, which means a supply curve shifts to the left. The price of orange juice increased by 20%, which resulted in a 10% increase in the quantity of apple juice consumed. Well, automatically, that should tell you that these are going to be, or this is cross price, because we're talking about two different goods. But then it tells you this applies to cross price elasticity of demand between orange juice and apple juice. It's 0.5. So, once again, you're just setting up those equations and making those determinations. In this, you don't even really have to make a determination. We know they're substitute goods, so you're just trying to figure out what that coefficient is. Cross prices. So an increase in the price of A will decrease in the demand for good B. So that's just simple cross price elasticity that these two are substitute goods. Sorry, complementary goods. This is an example of FRQ. You may or may not do this. We're not ready for the full thing yet because you've got to be able to put supply and demand together. But this would be an example of the first FRQ. This is a long FRQ, so this would be worth 10 points out of the total 20 on the free response portion of the test. But you can see long FRQs are pretty long. There's going to be a lot of little points to it. But it's just kind of you're working your way through the problems. And you'll get exposure to these. Obviously, when we get to the FRQ portion of the Unit 2 test, you're going to see something similar to this, a long FRQ, where you've got to kind of go through all these little different aspects and make these determinations.
Are we going to get some practice FRQs before this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so. All right. Questions on cross price or income?